On this Sunday night, Canada's medal count grows. 2 more bronze medals in one of the most exciting days of the Games.
And I think we're just getting started.
As Canada's Penny Oleksiak makes history. COVID-19 takes aim at the unprotected as a 4th wave looms.
The next wave, I think, will be largely in children.
More political turmoil in Myanmar and allegations the military is weaponizing COVID-19. And Canada marks its first Emancipation Day.
Don't give up the fight.
And the push to engage more black communities in politics.
Global National with Robin Gill. Reporting tonight, Eric Sorensen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canadians had plenty to cheer for at the Olympics today. 2 more bronze medals, one that made history and the other in the most watched 10 seconds in sports. Canadian sprinter Andre de Grasse ran his fastest time ever in the 100 meters. He captured bronze and became the first Canadian male to reach the podium in Tokyo. Until today, the women have been bringing home the hardware, and 4 of them captured another bronze in the pool today in the 4x100 medley relay. And it was all the more monumental for one of those athletes, Penny Oleksiak, who became Canada's most decorated Olympian ever. Goomansingh has tonight's top story.
Olympic glory and Canadian history. Penny Oleksiak swam her way into the record books with her teammates Kylie Moss, Maggie McNeil, and Sydney Pickram.
I think we honestly have the best team in the world, and I think we're just getting started. And I'm excited to see how many medals the swim team is going to bring Canada in the next couple Olympics.
Oleksiak, at just 21, has 7 Olympic medals, more than any other Canadian. 1 gold, 2 silver, and now 4 bronze. Her teammate and gold medalist McNeil feels it's a record that will stand.
I don't think it'll be reached for a very long time, if ever, but it's definitely inspiring, and to do it with her is even more incredible.
Incredible is a great way to describe the race. The team set a Canadian record, swimming the medley relay in 3 minutes, 52.60 seconds. Pickram, who swam the breaststroke, reacted honestly and off the cuff, saying in a live post-win interview that during her leg, she was S-ing herself.
At the end of the day, we're just people. I'm just a 24-year-old, and yeah, I will end up saying that sometimes. And I just didn't really think anything of it, but my brother loved the comment.
The other S word of the day, sprinting. If you blinked, you may have missed Andre de Grasse. He set a personal record in Tokyo running the 100 meters in 9.89 seconds, winning back-to-back Olympic bronze medals for the 100-meter sprint. De Grasse is also the first man to win a medal at these Games for Canada. He could also pick up another one. The 200-meter sprint is on Tuesday. Back in 2016, he won a silver in that event. Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Canada's medal count is now 14, and that puts us in 14th place in the overall standings with 3 golds, 4 silvers, and 7 bronze medals. Canada is on pace to have one of its best showings ever. In the 7 Summer Olympics over the last 25 years, Canada has won, on average, 3 gold medals. In Tokyo, we have 3 already, with 1 week to go. In total medals, Canada has reached the podium just under 20 times on average. And with 14 so far in these Games, we could reach our highest standing in the last quarter century. U.S. gymnast Simone Biles has withdrawn from the final of the women's floor event. The 4-time gold medalist has withdrawn from several finals this week, citing her struggles with mental health. It leaves only one event for Biles to possibly compete in, the balance beam, on Tuesday. Olympic organizers report 18 new Games-related COVID-19 cases, including 1 athlete. The infections bring the total Games-related cases to 259. More than 275,000 tests have been administered. Athletes are screened daily, and their movement is strictly curtailed. But Olympic officials are investigating an outdoor drinking party at the athletes' village involving multiple competitors. Rule breakers can be removed from the village and have their Olympic credentials taken away. 6 people have been banished so far, including 2 judo silver medalists from Georgia, who took a sightseeing tour around Tokyo. Here in this country, another province is set to move ahead with its next phase of recovery. Newfoundland and Labrador eased some public health restrictions today, increasing restaurant capacity and allowing larger gatherings. And changes to the mask mandate could come in another week. The province has no confirmed cases of COVID-19 at the moment. It's a different story elsewhere in the country, where the Delta variant is causing numbers to rise. As Global's Sarah Komadina reports, that's raising concern among medical professionals that ending pandemic protocols too quickly will result in a harder hit from the next wave.
Enough! Enough is enough! Enough!
It was important for Nija Bakshi to bring her daughters to the third day of rallies in Alberta, protesting the province's restriction rollback.
Only a few months away from being able to have our kids vaccinated, and so why rush it?
While the physician acknowledges restrictions eventually need to be lifted, she stresses right now just doesn't feel right.
Why are we doing this now? Why are we abandoning testing and tracing? And if we're going to do that, how are we going to mitigate the risk to our children, risk to the vulnerable population that cannot be vaccinated? And I think a bit more transparency is necessary.
Saskatchewan recently eased its COVID-19 restrictions, and it's now seeing a spike in infections. The province's active cases are climbing, reaching levels not seen in more than a month.
It's sort of like an expression of, wishing that COVID-19 is gone from these provinces, when in fact we may be seeing a beginning of a resurgence.
New Brunswick is already seeing a resurgence of COVID-19 just days after dropping virtually all of its restrictions. But the growing cases in other provinces isn't stopping Newfoundland and Labrador from entering its stage 2 of reopening plan, 15 days ahead of schedule.
We'll be keeping a close eye on things. We'll probably be able to learn from Alberta's experience in this regard.
Despite concerns from across the country, Alberta maintains its chief medical health officer's recommendations are informed by science, not politics. It comes as little comfort to Bakshi.
We aren't there with all of the things that we can be doing to protect our children. So it might be rooted in science, but timing is important.
Sarah Komadina, Global News, Edmonton.
As the Delta variant spreads across the country, experts say we could face a fourth wave in the pandemic. It may not prove as dire as previous waves, but it will target one group in particular, the unvaccinated. And as Caryn Lieberman reports, that includes children.
The next wave, I think, will be largely in children.
The prediction should come as no surprise, says this emergency physician who points out this is now a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and children under 12 aren't yet eligible for the shot.
I think schools are going to be the front lines of this next wave. I don't expect the death tolls to be what they were. I don't expect the hospital usage and ICU occupancies will be what they were.
With over 80% of eligible Canadians now vaccinated with their first dose and approximately 65% fully vaccinated, doctors say the virus is likely to target those who have not had the vaccine at all. And come September,
I suspect that we will see what we've seen in England and what we're seeing in the States and some other countries. I think kids will be a particular focus. We'll see a lot more cases in kids.
These parents are conflicted about whether to vaccinate their 12-year-old daughter.
For kids, I don't know. It's a little bit early for me.
For me, it's better kids get vaccine and go to school. It's very important to go to school, I think.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford has said a back-to-school plan will be released early in the week and that the province is ready for September. Meantime, the medical officer of health revealed there will be a separate set of rules for students based on their vaccination status.
If you are 2-dose vaccinated plus 14 days, we'll offer you a test if you've been a contact of a high-risk person, so someone that's had ongoing fever and cough or increasing shortness of breath. If you test negative, you can go right back to school, you can go right back to work. If you are not immunized and you've been in contact with a high-risk contact, you'll be off for a minimum of 10 days.
And be subjected to 2 tests. Still, this Toronto mother says she will not be vaccinating her children who are under 12 when they are eligible.
If kids in 12 were filling up the hospitals and the ICUs, it would be a completely different story, but they're not.
Although children are unlikely to get a severe case of COVID-19, this pediatric infectious disease expert says they do remain vulnerable to the virus and its long-lasting effects.
I've had families where you have healthy young teenagers that get COVID and then they have all the classical long hauler symptoms that adults have.
If they choose not to get the vaccine, she adds, they should learn from home. This mother hopes to avoid that.
He would love to be vaccinated too, and he will be soon, but yeah, he's looking forward to it. He wants to see his friends, he wants to be in class and learn.
Caryn Lieberman, Global News, Toronto.
Millions of eligible Americans don't want to be vaccinated. Health officials are desperate to change their minds as that Delta variant gains speed. Meantime, around 20% of all new cases in the U.S. are coming from Florida. And as Jennifer Johnson reports, that doesn't seem to concern the state's governor.
Florida is America's new hotbed in the COVID-19 pandemic, recording over 21,000 new cases in one day, its highest number ever. Nationwide, new cases are now averaging more than 70,000 a day.
Patients are showing up sick today and last week, and unfortunately, this is going to continue for at least another 6 weeks.
Universal Resort and SeaWorld are now joining Walt Disney World and asking visitors to wear masks indoors.
Welcome back.
But Florida's Republican governor is rejecting any statewide rules.
There will be no restrictions and no mandates in the state of Florida.
But with the Delta variant quickly spreading, President Joe Biden says new federal mandates may happen.
In all probability,
the pace of vaccinations did increase over 20% last week, but experts are frustrated there are still 100 million unvaccinated Americans.
We've really got to get those people to change their minds, make it easy for them, convince them, do something to get them to be vaccinated, because they are the ones that are propagating this outbreak.
The U.S. is keeping eyes on Israel as it becomes the first country in the world to give booster shots to residents over 60 as the vaccines start to lose effectiveness.
We've decided to add this vaccination in order to keep up the level of it that we need in order to fight the Delta variant.
In America, Dr. Fauci says things will get worse with this latest surge, warning of more pain and suffering ahead. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Coming up, Turkey's tourists on the run as deadly wildfires burn toward the beaches. Firefighters are battling flames in southern Turkey as wildfires threaten towns and resorts. At least 8 people have died in the fires. Thousands have been evacuated, with panicked tourists and residents fleeing by boat. A heat wave along the Aegean and Mediterranean coasts is being blamed for some of the worst wildfires in a decade. And neighboring Greece isn't being spared. The same heat wave is sparking evacuations. Dozens of homes have been destroyed in several villages. 15 people have been hospitalized for breathing issues from the smoke. Officials say it could get worse. Temperatures in Greece are expected to reach 45 degrees this week. Here in this country, an evacuation order has been issued for a cabin community in the southern interior of BC as dry and windy weather fuels an out-of-control wildfire. People were told to leave Eastgate, south of Princeton, on Saturday as the Garrison Lake fire grew to nearly 8,200 hectares. It's one of more than 90 out-of-control fires in a highly active fire season in the province. As of today, fires have scorched more than 500,000 hectares of land in BC. That far surpasses the 10-year average of 349,000 hectares. Still ahead, the pandemic is worsening the military crisis in Myanmar. Afghan forces are in fierce battles with the Taliban as the terror group carries out assaults on 3 major cities. Kandahar, Lashkar-Gah, and Herat have all come under heavy fire. Afghanistan's Ministry of Defense sent hundreds of commandos to Herat in a bid to prevent militants from taking control of the economically important city. The U.S. military is supporting government forces with airstrikes, but the Taliban is rapidly seizing territory throughout the country as the U.S. and NATO troops withdraw after nearly 20 years. The United Nations says more than 300,000 Afghans have fled the fighting, and many are leaving the country after the U.S. began its withdrawal in May. It's been 6 months since Myanmar's military seized control of the country. The head of the regime, who appointed himself prime minister, promises to hold elections 2 years from now. But the Southeast Asian country, also known as Burma, has been in turmoil since the February 1st coup. Protesters have persisted in their calls for the release of democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi in the face of brutal crackdowns on dissent. Now, activists say the military junta is weaponizing COVID-19 against its own people. Redmond Shannon reports.
Another clamber for oxygen during a brutal rise in COVID-19 cases, this time in Myanmar, allegedly made worse by the military regime withholding medical supplies from its opponents.
Healthcare workers are being attacked and arrested. The virus is spreading through the population very fast indeed.
On Sunday, leader Min Aung Hlaing blamed the opposition for the virus spread. Marking 6 months since his coup, he is promising free and fair elections by August 2023, with 2 more years of a state of emergency.
If he actually believes in democracy and democratic values, he wouldn't stage a coup on 1st of February and continue killing civilians until today. So again, these are empty promises.
Wei Nin Pwinton is a Burmese democracy activist. Just like her father, he was jailed at the start of the coup. Months of protests since then have seen hundreds of deaths and thousands of arrests. Pwinton says the previous regime of Aung San Suu Kyi was deeply flawed too, accountable to the military, but it was democratically elected.
In Burma, we never had a genuine or even a democracy at all. In city areas, yes, we had relative freedom, but in ethnic area, human rights abuses and human rights violations continue in that 10 years period.
Including the persecution and killing of Rohingya Muslims in 2017, actions Ottawa calls genocide. Long-term change, she says, will need more international pressure, like the sanctions imposed by Canada and others.
They have been able to get away with all these atrocities, not only from the 1st of February, but from many, many decades. And so they have this sense of impunity that they can get away with almost everything.
Leaders in the region meet Monday to appoint an envoy to broker talks between the junta and the opposition. And this week, the first trial of Suu Kyi is set to wrap. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Up next, Canadian politics heats up again, but why do very few black voices have a say in it?
You're watching Global National.
Across the country, Canadians are marking the first official Emancipation Day. It commemorates the abolition of slavery in the British Empire in 1834. In March, the federal government voted to recognize Emancipation Day annually on August the 1st. Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard, who led the push, says this is just the start.
The national recognition of Emancipation Day signals the beginning of what we do next. We need to have education about Black history woven across curricula and all year long. So that's one of the things. An apology. We've not had an apology.
The end of slavery did not bring an end to discrimination in this country. Black Canadians have faced barriers in voting rights and in holding public office that is still reflected in Parliament today. Black Canadians make up 3.5% of the population, but barely 2% in the Senate and in the House of Commons. When voters don't see themselves represented, engaging them in elections is a challenge. Ross Lord reports on the consequences and the efforts to bring change in Nova Scotia.
On election night 1993, Wayne Adams made history. He became the first black member of the Nova Scotia legislature. Almost 3 decades later, the number of black MLAs in the province is stuck at 1.
I had envisaged that there'd be a floodgate opening after my election with many African Nova Scotians applying for a career in public life.
The sting of stalled progress hurts most in communities like North Preston, where most residents are black and which bears the brunt of systemic racism.
I think, especially for Nova Scotia, having only one black MLA is definitely not enough.
There are new efforts underway. For the first time, Elections Nova Scotia has hired an outreach officer to increase participation in African Nova Scotian communities like this one.
Voting is very important, and African Nova Scotians community in particular, we don't really pay much attention to that because we don't see representation from ourselves very much so in the election process. So this is one of the reasons why I'm here.
Operation Black Vote says there are 11 black candidates in the Nova Scotia election from an expected total of almost 200 candidates. In the provincial riding that includes North Preston, all three parties have nominated black candidates. But efforts to promote participation are still undermined by racial controversy. Provincial Liberal candidate Angela Simmons, who's a lawyer, is filing an official complaint against the RCMP. Simmons and her husband Dean, a police officer, say they feared for their lives after they were pulled over at gunpoint by RCMP this month.
This is why it's important to have somebody like her at the decision-making table, because she can talk about her lived experience of driving in Nova Scotia and being pulled over by the police and the experience that she had.
The RCMP defends its officers, saying the couple's car matched the description of a suspect in a shooting incident. Federally, progress is also sluggish. More than a half century after Lincoln Alexander became the first black member of Parliament, there are 7 black MPs in the 338-seat House of Commons.
We seem to not be building but replacing black elected officials, and that's something that we want to change.
In Nova Scotia and across Canada, that change is happening more slowly than surely. Ross Lord, Global News, North Preston, Nova Scotia.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Eric Sorensen. Tonight, your Canada is Clearwater Lake Regional Park in Saskatchewan. We would love to see your corner of the country, so please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Farah Nasser will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.